George Wilson, welcome to Trade Finance Talks TV here in Porto.
Thank you, Deepesh.
Thank you. So here we are at It for Porto. Can you give a quick introduction? Who are you, where are you from, and what do you do?
So my name is George Wilson. I head up the new trade finance business in Investec Bank, South Africa.
Great, and you were previously at ABSA, right?
I was, and I've been in Africa now doing trade finance for over 10 years.
Yeah. So African trade finance, I'm going to ask you a question about foreign exchange because I think that's had a really key impact on access to trade finance for African businesses. Why are the two so interlinked, and why is it important to talk about access to FX?
So the fundamental point is that trade finance globally is denominated in dollars. And it's also the store of value for all of the African and emerging market central banks. And that access to FX is what really is the oil for the trade markets in Africa and in all emerging markets. And the point is that it's incredibly scarce. Simply, African countries don't export enough in dollars to generate the dollars that they need to pay for their imports. And that's writ large across emerging markets, but it's particularly true in Africa. And there is a profound shortage of the FX, and that's the major challenge in promoting and facilitating African trade finance is finding those dollars of the right shape and quality.
So what can we do to get more US dollar liquidity into African markets? So,
there is the natural source of dollars which central banks collect, and they're very focused on their FX import cover in order to maintain their balance of payments. So there is a natural source from their exports. Unfortunately, some African economies just, as I say, simply don't export enough to cover their import requirements. Pretty much all trade finance in Africa, cross-border trade finance, is denominated in dollars. And aside from that natural export dollar liquidity, there is a thriving market for trade refinance. Unfortunately, because of some requirements for that trade refinance, it doesn't provide enough liquidity to make up the shortfall. There is also a thriving market for what are called structured LCs, which is essentially a method that African countries and African banks can import dollars, short-term trade tenor dollars, into their countries.
Yeah, really interesting. So the trade refinancing part and the structured letters of credit part. And am I right in saying that it for the ARC, the African Regional Committee, have recently done quite a lot of work, and you've co-authored one of the white papers really looking at how we can promote and boost trade finance to African SMEs. What are the key take-homes from the white paper, and what can we do to really boost trade finance to African SMEs? Because we know they're some of the biggest, they have the biggest challenges when you talk about the 1.7 trillion trade finance gap.
Yeah, the trade finance gap in Africa is estimated, or it was pre-COVID, estimated to be around 120 billion. It's almost certainly north of that now through the depredations of COVID, Ukraine, consequences of the Ukraine invasion, and the dollar liquidity situation and the trade gap has certainly worsened, and the answer to that trade gap, or the root causes of that trade gap, has been, is well understood, and what it's really about is African SMEs being unable to obtain dollars obtain trade facilities really from their financial institutions and their banks,
which are dollar denominated.
I guess the one stage further than that is, why are those banks unable or unwilling to give them their trade facilities? And the answer to that is, they can do one of two things. They can either give them the trade facilities, which due to regulation, global regulation, is unfortunately deeply unprofitable for those banks, or they can take the same scarce capital and liquidity and simply buy their local government bonds with zero risk and lock in a double-digit return. So they always opt to avoid the trade and go for the bonds. Hence the missing facilities, hence the gap.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's talk about, I guess, trade finance as an asset class, and I think, we all know that we need to look at more vehicles and ways to get more finance through funds, etc., into trade finance. But let's also take a look at the sustainability market and the amount of capital that is in that market ready to deploy. Could perhaps sustainability-linked finance be that vehicle or channel into African SMEs to help them with their trade finance, given the problems you've explained?
Yes, absolutely. So that's what's so frustrating. There's already a very large trade gap, and it has a huge impact on developing fragile economies in Africa, and solving that would make a huge difference and be extremely developmentally beneficial, in that 30% of GDP growth in these countries comes from trade finance. The SME traders employ up to 85% of the populations. So it's obviously got a very beneficial effect, and the frustrating point is that there are billions, perhaps trillions of dollars in the impact and alternative investment market, desperately looking for an ESG or sustainable home for their investment dollars, and it could very elegantly solve the trade gap and provide them with safe, really sustainable financing opportunities and investments. The issue comes around defining what is sustainable in this kind of context. And you're right, ITFA has drafted a positioning paper specifically on this point, and that's really because the sustainable finance taxonomies that have been developed up to this point have been for non-trade ECA or debt, and coming up to COP27, the ICC is going to publish a sustainable trade finance paper, and various taxonomies have been drafted globally, the EU taxonomy, etc. And at the moment, they haven't really catered for trade, and they haven't really catered, certainly, for African markets. And the idea behind the positioning paper that ITFA is publishing, the ITFA ARC, the regional committee, African regional committee, is that we get the African voice into the definitions in the taxonomies and frameworks, and we are able to use that as a link to those pools of sustainable investment financing.
Thank you very much, George, for joining me on Trade Finance Talk TV. A lot covered, from sustainability and taxonomy as a vehicle to get into African SMEs, and also some of the key challenges around FX and dollar liquidity for Africa. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.